What if the biggest threat to your own brand's visibility isn't a competitor? It's your own old messaging. Today, we sit down with David Kirkdorffer, a B2B growth marketing leader and strategic advisor who has spent more than 20 years helping technology companies turn positioning and content into measurable revenue. David brings a sharp take on generative engine optimization and why the way buyers discover brands is changing faster than most marketing teams realize. This one will make you think differently about what your brand actually looks like in the mirror. Let's get started. Hello, welcome to the Liftgate Marketing Podcast. Danielle, I got a question for you. I've been picking up on a shift with in-house marketing teams in terms of how they're structuring, and it's been kind of interesting, and I want to get your take on this. But, you think about 3 years ago, marketing departments were really organized by these channels. You had these SEO experts and these paid experts and so on, developers and email team and so on. Each group kind of had its own budget, its own KPI, its own corner of the org chart. But now I'm seeing a little bit of a shift where that might be disappearing, and it seems to have moved towards this kind of matrix structure where digital, creative, and all these social disciplines are collaborating across an entire customer journey, if you will. But I think that makes sense. Customers don't really experience your brand in silos, right? They bounce between these channels all over the place. And I think that making those teams more organized that way makes some sense. But I don't know. I've seen it in a couple scenarios, and I think it makes sense, but I wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah, I think everybody wants attribution for their piece of the puzzle. And if we're finding anything, it's that attribution is not very accurate and everything matters. And so something that we're looking at Atelier Commerce is the life cycle marketing. Like I'm seeing more of the life cycle marketing role. A lot of times, life cycle marketing has meant email and SMS. That's totally inaccurate. Life cycle is the entire journey for a customer, and it touches performance and growth marketing and conversion rate optimization. And so I think it makes a lot of sense because if you are operating in silos, and I see that happen a lot, that you are duplicating efforts, you're wasting money, and you're probably having a really poor experience for your customer because things are so fragmented.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think also, AI is playing a role in this too. You're seeing the hierarchies getting flattened, if you will, and the middle of these organizations being taken out because AI is coming in and automating a lot of those middle manager type tasks. So you've got these flatter structures with fewer layers between that CMO and the leader and the people that are actually doing the work. There's fewer coordinators, fewer specialists doing repetitive tasks, and more senior operators that are more strategic. If a client is working with an agency, that's kind of what they would expect, right, out of that team as well.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about last episode that the CMO role also is being threatened. So that really supports that more flattened hierarchy.
Yeah. So I'm curious about our guest today and what their take might be. Who do you have for us?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to our next guest, more focused on B2B. So David Kirkdorffer is a B2B growth marketing leader and strategic advisor who helps technology companies turn positioning, messaging, and content into measurable revenue. With experience spanning more than 20 years across 20 plus startups and multiple public companies, he has built and led marketing functions from seed stage through acquisition and IPO. David specializes in aligning marketing and sales to drive pipeline growth with a focus on demand generation, buyer enablement, and distinctive brand positioning. His work has contributed to 4 successful acquisitions, 1 public offering, and he is frequently rehired by executives, a testament to both his impact and approach. More recently, David has been at the forefront of helping B2B companies adapt to AI-driven search through GEO, ensuring brands are visible and accurately represented in tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. His perspective bridges traditional go-to-market strategy with emerging realities of how buyers discover and evaluate solutions in an AI-first world. So let's bring David. That was a lot of stuff, David. Is this accurate?
I'm tired already. Whew. I'm so thankful you just kept it at 20 plus years. That's great. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, at some point you just got to cap it off. I mean, I'm there with you.
Why not? Right, exactly.
What we were just talking about, what are you seeing in marketing?
So it's very interesting that you talk about what is the role of marketing and marketing team organization and so forth, right? So one of the key things I have that I speak to with my clients is that with relation to generative engine optimization and geo and being found and visible in LLMs, is that LLMs don't really care about what department put out what information or when the information was put out. They're constructing a, if you will, an understanding of who we are based on everything from all the departments and from everywhere and every when. Your today's information is fighting against the information from your predecessor, perhaps. So what does that mean ultimately for us as an organization, as a marketing team? We do need to coordinate more. The information that the SEO team is organizing for us and adding structure to is, of course, very important. But that function isn't sufficient anymore to succeed in this new world. It's vital, it's necessary, it's just not everything and it's not all. So what the content team is doing, what the demand gen team is doing, what even the sales teams are pumping out, because they help shape the questions that people ask, all become picked up in various places. The PR releases that get picked up, the industry listings, the ways you're described on various different third-party websites, if they're not consistent, because you haven't somehow had a good job of policing. You know, if you've have anyone who's worked in major enterprise software companies will know a term, whether it's exactly the same, the brand police. You can't put anything out until it goes through the brand police to make sure you're using the right words in the right ways, so you're not confusing the message. Because everyone has a motivation to twist the message just a little bit to suit their particular need in that moment, which with maybe 400 people in the marketing department creates a lot of variation. And so that variation, if it gets picked up around the web, then that just creates a diluted understanding of who we all are, as the brand is. And what's difficult for a human to interpret becomes even harder for an LLM, because we can kind of gestalt things. We can kind of like say, yeah, it's kind of in this ballpark, that's enough. I got what I need, I can go figure it out. But an LLM, if it doesn't understand what you are, it doesn't feel safe about representing you. And it can't represent you, therefore, in an answer. So this convergence of needing to align across the narrative, this is maybe the word I'm searching for here, getting our narrative straight and reproduced across all of the kind of go-to-market pillars that we might have, and making sure that people have designated language that they can use, is now important for small companies, not just big companies, because that corroborable, findable in multiple places kind of approach to saying who we are and what we do and how we do it and all the things makes it more likely that your information is going to be found, selected because it's found to be corroborated across multiple spaces. And then at the same time, if you've done a good job of how you've written it, and there's a whole conversation around that, it's going to be extractable. So how do we organize our marketing teams? If we're thinking about our overall visibility in the market, we now have a mirror of that called LLMs. And you can ask a question of an LLM of your own brand. Go into incognito mode, or the kind of, hidden mode, if you will, so that none of your chat histories are present as part of the context of the conversation. Say, hey, tell me everything you can find about these guys. Do you turn up? Or perhaps start out with a category. Who are the players in this category? See what the world is giving you back. This is a mirror. It's not here to say that it's correct or it's right. That's us to change. It's just a mirror. So our marketing teams have the goal of sharing who we are and what we do. And we used to talk to our customers and prospects to kind of make sure we're aligned, and we still ought to, because those are the people who we're being disintermediated from with LLMs, right? And it's much easier for actually most people to go to an LLM and ask a question than it is to go hunting for the answer across all of our web pages, because every website is set up differently. It's like, it might be here, I just don't know where it is. It's a bit of a treasure hunt to find the thing I'm looking for right now. So maybe I've taken this already down a particularly bad rabbit hole, but marketing teams have changed, and we now have a way to consolidate how our impact is being seen in the market. And LLMs I think of as being a kind of a mirror. They'll reflect back to you what's out there, good or bad, current or old, whatever seems to be predominant narrative will be what you get. And if it seems as if it's not quite right, not quite complete, not quite differentiated the way you thought, well, then we know what we can work on. But we've got a mirror. Now we've got a mirror, but you kind of couldn't quite get that, because, and the difference between a Google search and an LLM search is The Google search, it gave us the page where we could go into the individual pages and extract the bits that we thought we wanted or needed based on what we're looking for. The LLM is kind of doing that for us and putting it together. It's gestalting it all for us. And it's going with what the main themes are, which often is not exactly what we want them to think. And that gap is where our opportunity lies.
Yeah, I like the analogy of it being a mirror. And I've also heard it, it's really reputation management, which marketing doesn't normally handle like this reputation as much. But that's, I think, something that we've been advocating for. So now it's just like, hey, this is the reality. This is a reflection of how our brand is perceived. And these are recommendations to change it. So that's a really great take. Let's dive into the podcast. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get into marketing?
So long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was a student at Boston University, and I got my first job out of college working for my market research professor, Professor Martin. Many professors have little consultancies on the side. So I did market research for a number of years, qualitative and quantitative. So I was doing survey design. I kind of followed the John Martin, and John Martin was a student of Philip Kotler. So we were following the Kotler methodology for those who are familiar with Kotler. So I started in marketing there. I knew in college that it wasn't going to be finance. No, it's not going to be accounting. No. Human resources sounded as if it was too flim-flammy and everyone kind of like had bad things to say. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. And operations management seemed like a mystery, like I'd be working in a factory or something. So what's left? Okay, well, marketing. That sounds like fun. So I got into that. And then I've been doing marketing since then. My second job after that was working at my first software company, which was a company called Software House, which is an amazing brand to think that one could have had at that point. And that was for folks who were in Cambridge, Massachusetts, one of those companies that was an offshoot from MIT. It was a database company. And I've been in software marketing since then.
Wow. So it goes to the beginning. I think you're our second guest, maybe third, who's actually had their IM marketing from the beginning. So hats off to you.
Thank you. With that, I should probably put on my marketing hat. There we go.
Speaking
as
of,
we're in this segment of the conversation.
Speaking of, David is known for wearing multiple hats. And so he just put on a marketing hat, if you're listening, a legitimate hat that says marketing hat. How many hats do you have?
5.
What do they say?
Well, we've got the marketing hat, which is, kind of important. And for a while, I still do it when people ask. I'm just giving them away for free. So I just have a bunch of these made up and then I mail them out to people. So there's a small cadre of individuals out there with varying degrees of tatteredness of their hats, because it's been a year or two since I started with marketing hats. So I've got the marketing hat, but importantly, I know who my clients are and they want to know that I'm on their side. So for those who are in marketing, avert your eyes. I'm wearing a sales hat right now. Because in most of the situations I've been involved with, I've spent a lot of my career in demand gen, and sales has been my customer. So I have the sales hat, and we can jump into other hats as the moment takes us, I suppose. Let's leave it at that.
So you've been in B2B the whole time, right?
I have, yes. It's always been B2B, though the market research wasn't always B2B. The market research actually primarily was B2C. So I did transportation studies for Logan Airport. We used to do cable network studies, different cable systems across the country, how they were liked and didn't like things. We do all sorts of fun things like discriminant analysis and cluster analysis and conjoint analysis and factor analysis and various types of multiple regression, so that we could kind of pinpoint what's driving user satisfaction. What are the levers, if you will, that a business could be applying to raise customer satisfaction. So it's always been interesting that I think of this. It's always been from a buyer perspective. That has been kind of my, I don't know if you call it secret sauce exactly, but that's been my perspective. What helps the buyer? So the market research clearly was to try and identify the elements that were bugging or pleasing various constituents and buyers. And we used to do telephone research and, direct mail, all the fun things.
Are you currently part of an in-house team, or are you consulting with in-house teams?
I am consulting. I am not part of an in-house team. When COVID started, I found myself right at that moment just between roles. And as I've done often throughout my career, you do some consulting, we call it fractional now. Then we just called it kind of part-time work while we're looking for a full-time job. And then during COVID, I did take a role in one organization that I was like any port in a storm. I wasn't sure if this was going to be a viable long-term, and it turned out not to be, and so that was a mutual parting. That was okay. And then after that, I was like, I don't know, I'm working from home anyway, so why don't I just try and become a kind of a consultant? I'm not a very good salesperson, which is surprising to some people, I'm sure.
Your marketing hat looked a lot more broken in than your sales hat.
Yes.
Like I don't think you're wearing the sales hat very much.
It's true. I don't wear the sales hat as often. So I have a couple of clients who I work with now. And as you mentioned in the introduction, it's a lot to do with it's less to do with demand gen now and more to do with baseline positioning clarity, differentiation, content creation that supports the narrative, helping craft a narrative. So I'm working with a couple of startups where the founder CEO is an engineer by background, has lived the problem, has seen the problem that they're trying to solve in their software repeatedly in his career, and said, maybe there's a thing here. It's not just one place that has a problem. I see this a few places. Maybe we should do something. So he's starting that. So he's got the kind of, the two I'm thinking of, have the customer framework knowledge in mind, but not how to tell their own story a little bit. So once you get into the weeds, they're great. It's just that no one wants to start there. So how do we position and message and create a narrative that suits where the buyer's coming from, not just where that individual's experiences have been? And there's often gaps in those things.
David, you've had a very great career in marketing. And I like how you're talking about starting in market research, because a lot of people still going to college for marketing today are coming out with that knowledge. Like I remember one of my classes was just on how to create surveys to get the data that was meaningful. And when you think about marketing in the real world outside of academia, it's nothing like that. You're like, hey, I actually know how to make a really great survey, and I think we should put a Likert scale in here. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's hard to advocate for, hey, we need to do the marketing research. And I think a lot of CEOs, other executives don't actually understand that the role of a marketer is to represent the buyer and the consumer. What have you been seeing, given your experience in academia and in the real world and over the course of, decades? How has marketing changed? And is marketing aligned with what it should be aligned with?
So it's like an ever-flowing river, and everyone jumps in at a different point, and there are lots of bends, and we all get caught up in them. So analogy aside, just remember that good market research starts with the decision. What decision are we trying to make? And that's our decision objective. Then we say, well, what information would we wish to have that could either support or refute the making of that decision? So you had information objectives. And then from the information objectives, which is not questions, information objectives, we would want to know this, we would want to know that, we would want to know these things, so that we would have the information to support the making of a particular decision. We will do this, we will do that, right? So once we've got the information objectives, then we can step back and say, well, now how are we going to get this information objective? What information is needed to support that information objective? Okay, and so you start to build out into, let's call it like tactics, your question tactics, right? So this is a familiar planning framework that many people have. One that I came across kind of late in my career, I suppose, but has stuck with me, is something called GOST, which is goals, objectives, strategies, tactics. Again, it's a way of breaking down from a higher level down to a lower level and understanding that a tactic is different from a strategy. A strategy supports an objective. An objective is to achieve a goal. And so when you see that ladder a little bit, it helps me keep in mind, am I thinking about a strategy or a tactic at this moment, right? So that's helpful, especially when we're in that kind of planning mode. And conveniently, it kind of mirrors the research process. And the research process is a scientific process, right? We want to prove this thing is true. We want to prove that thing is true. What do we need to figure out? And is it repeatable and so forth and so on? So that's one thing to keep in mind. And that's that planning process of GOST, goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics, we can apply to any of our individual domain kind of related activities, whether it's PR or demand gen or overall marketing. And you can see how it can kind of break out and ladder out. What's changed? Well, the mediums that we've had available to communicate to our business in a B2B kind of context have certainly expanded. Once upon a time, there was no internet. So no digital marketing. All the attribution vendors listening to this go like, oh, shock, horror. What could we have done? Oh my God, that's awful. What a terrible world that would have been. But there was attribution. There was Nielsen. Nielsen existed, and they basically wanted to know if you were watching a show. And if you did watch that show, then great, thank you, because it meant you probably watched that ad and listening to the radio. Did you hear that ad? Did you remember this? There was aided and unaided recall. That's the beginning of kind of attribution. Unaided is like, what did you remember? And aided is, of course, do you remember the ad for X, whatever it might have been? What do you remember about it? That type of stuff. Because people were spending money and they wanted to know if that was making an impact. So there was that kind of thing. What else has changed? The speed with which markets move. The availability of information on the buyer side is overwhelming. So back in the day, speaking again in a B2B context, if you were a buyer and you were buying something that was kind of expensive, that was going to impact your department, not just you, but even just you, but your department or your company or some kind of workflow that a bunch of people would be involved with, and you wanted to think about doing software as opposed to the manual things that you were doing, you had really no choice but to go to the vendor to find out how it worked. What did it do? Would it fit? I mean, once, maybe it's irrelevant now. Well, it is irrelevant now. But people used to build their own apps. You started with a database. You added a fourth generation language or a third generation language if you wanted, and you built your own apps as a business. And the only people who built their own apps were the people who had computers. And the only people who had computers were large enterprises. There was no SaaS, there was no, cloud. So the marketing channel essentially was sales, and everything became sales enablement. So you didn't have a website, you did advertising, you had user groups, you had community events that you went to and shows. There was a vibrant print media for all sorts of different types of things that used to exist, right? Now, all of these things are kind of like transliterated to our modern world. We don't have, PC Week and PC Mag and all the different PC something or others. We've now got websites, right? They do those things. Or we still have a few websites that kind of focus on those things. Advertising still matters, but it's not just print advertising. Now it's digital advertising. And a really big change that came along was when Google started to say, we can do attribution at the individual creative level. And that was like, ooh, that sounds really good. Because, before it was just at a certain kind of medium level. The magazine came in from a magazine, came in from a this or that. But then we could tie individual attribution to individual creatives, which were placed in individual places to individual markets. So we had this ability to get hyper granular. And as most marketers like more data, and the granularity was appealing. And so we kind of abandoned the how did you hear about us question that we had on the website, which was kind of existing when websites came along. And some people might be smiling, remembering how that became popular again about 5 years ago, and for good reason. It measures something different. But anyway, let's get past that. But now we've got advertising attribution that's so tied to digital media that we undervalue all the other things that are not directly click attributable. And that creates a disconnect between what we harvest, what we convert versus what we create in marketing. So I've gone on a bit of a ramble here. My apologies, sorry. I do that sometimes. So please feel free to interrupt and kind of like direct me if you think there's something in particular I should kind of spend more time on. Marketing's become much more complicated. Let's put it that way. There's far more information. The point I was trying to get to, and I interrupted myself, is that the buyer has more and more information that all looks pretty good. Relatively, the average level of quality of information has gone up. So buyers are overwhelmed with information, and yet at the same time, they're asking themselves, have we found the right information that we would need? So there's this weird kind of FOMO kind of vibe that can exist. So I'm inundated with claims and things that are being told to me by all these vendors. It sounds good, They all sound kind of the same, so it's difficult to discern the differences between them. Okay. And at the same time, I'm not sure if I found the right information that I really would need to know. And that's why more and more of the buying journey is not revealed to the vendor. So as Kerry Cunningham in Sixth Sense's research and others are now also kind of piggybacking on the same idea, that buyers are spending 80% of their overall journey of discovery before contacting a vendor, and that the vendor that they contact first in their selection set, if you will, of 3 or 4 contenders, the one they contact first, 75% of the time or more, is actually the vendor they end up buying from. So a good question to ask is, hey, you're talking to a couple of vendors. Who did you call first? Just kind of curious. That's your column A. And so, now you know where you sit in that game.
That's great. It's fascinating. And I like that recap. The aspect of research is kind of a path I want to go down here for a minute. So now you've got the ability to leverage AI to help conduct research, whether it's surveys, phone calls. What role, especially in B2B and the folks you're talking to, what role is research playing, either from a, hey, should we go to market with this product? And then another path for research is the pre and the post surveys and research done in terms of brand lift and awareness. Tell me what you're seeing on the B2B side there.
Well, I think that at least in the marketing teams that I interact with and many I speak with that don't necessarily work with, everyone is using AI in every aspect of marketing. So if you're a PR person, you've got a number of things you're doing. If you're a demand gen person, you've got a number of things you're doing. Everyone's got a workflow, if you will, that is being impacted by AIs either helping in idea generation or idea corroboration. I had this idea. I'm thinking of doing this. What am I missing? 6 months from now, when the thing's finished, what might have gone wrong that I could have done something about now so that I can kind of like think beyond what my thinking is. I know I want to do with this. Tell me how to do it. Tell me what I'm thinking of. Tell me what I'm not thinking of. Help me educate myself about my own domain. So there's a lot of that goes on.
Do you think AI would ever tell you it's a bad idea?
Yes, if you frame the question properly, if you create the context for it to be able to ask that and answer that, I should say. AIs are a little bit like a puppy. They want to please. They get happy when you're happy. They contextualize what they say based on who you are, what you've asked for, what they have gleaned as your major intent. And let's call it your major intent is your overarching theme across all your conversations. And minor intent is, what are you talking about today? What's the thing you're focused on today, right? So you can create a scenario just like you can with a good friend. A good friend is going to try and help give you supportive information. They're there to support you, like we like to think of, right? But a good friend also, if they're given the context to feel safe, they'll also tell you, well, that's a stupid idea. David, I mean, sure, but think about that. Here's the things you're missing that you might want to think about. You be the judge of whether you think it's still a good idea or not. Can you do these things? Would you be able to do those things, for example? So an AI isn't going to just say, David, that was a bad idea, because I might not have asked the question quite as directly. Few of us often do. But if we learn how to ask open questions, this is interesting thinking about the market research. How do you ask an open-ended question that is not biased, that does not lead the respondent to a particular conclusion? And just even the sequence of your questions biases the answer. Right? If you ever did classic market research, you could ask in the first 3 questions, how satisfied are you with foo, whatever foo is? Or in the last 3 questions, how satisfied are you with foo? And you'll find that the second, at the end of the survey, always scores lower. Why? Well, I've had more time to think about it. You've taken me through some of the ins and outs. And now that I'm thinking about it, we came across a couple of problems. And so it comes down. So just sequencing the questions makes a difference. And we know that because we like to present our arguments in a particular order because it builds the story that we're trying to build. Okay. Yes, you can have the question. You can ask questions of AIs and get answers back that represents, if you will, the river of ideas that you're swimming in. So if you allow the river of ideas that you're swimming in to be a broader context, that's where it can surface some of the objectionable stuff or ask you to ask deeper questions. One query prompt I would suggest everyone have, please remember this, write it down, whatever, is this, critique your own response. So I will often and frequently across different LLMs and with even the same one, say, that's interesting, thank you. Please critique your response. Question 1, what did you like about it? Question 2, what did you not like about it? Question 3, what was missing or underrepresented in it? And I'll get some interesting stuff come back. And there's a reason for that. First of all, it tells me, well, the answer was organized and it was logical and it presented information in a good way. So that's what it liked about it. So, okay, fine. Maybe I shouldn't bother asking that question anymore, but sometimes it reveals things. What did I not like about it? Well, I didn't talk about this. I didn't talk about that. I didn't mention anything about these other things. What's underrepresented or missing? Well, there are these other, perspectives and points of views or whatever. Why does that happen? Because everything that an LLM does in its response to you is time and budget constrained. Think of what it's doing. You're typing a question in. Perhaps it's a half page worth of context because we can do that now. It's analyzing that whole big block of stuff, figuring out what your main intent is, breaking that out into a research project of a bunch of different questions. That's the query fan out that we're familiar with, which is why keywords don't work anymore for us, or they're less impactful, I should say. This is not an SEO bashing session. All those queries go off, fetch information relating to your intent, because the AIs realize multiple ways of slicing this that might reveal information. It comes back with a bunch of different information chunks. It then says ruthlessly, now which of these bits really, really fit the intent of this query situation I'm trying to deal with, and then which of these chunks is easy for me to extract pieces from, because I'm going to generate, hence the the generative part, the response. And it does all of this with milliseconds. So if I was to ask a really big question like, what is the meaning of life? Now that's a question that might take a few cycles. There are libraries that could be consulted on this topic, right? We could talk about this until the cows come home, until more cows are born. But the LLM says, yeah, okay, big question. I'm just going to give you about 15 cents worth of, of query time and bring back the answer that I can get back, that's easy to bring back, that's clear, that addresses most of your need right now. So when you ask it to critique itself, you're paying for a second fetch. You're giving it to say, now you found this, what else is there that ought to have been found in this? It's also important because just because the cup is full on the query constraint doesn't mean that was the end of where the information lay.
That's great advice. So when you're looking at GEO and what you're doing right now, you're very passionate about this subject. Why is this where you're going right now? And like, what are you working? Yeah. Oh, hey, new hat, marketing hat GPT. Let's talk about it. Who are you working with, first of all? Like, and what are you excited about? Like, this is a huge shift, it seems like, from what you've been doing.
Yes. And in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. So I work with clients on projects. Two main lines of project is training. This isn't supposed to be an advertorial, but I do various types of trainings to marketing departments as a team, not just the SEO people, because it turns out the rest of the people have a big impact, as we perhaps discussed. And then I do homepage audits, because the homepage is often the prize page, and the prize page has on it many of the things that one does on other pages. So if you can understand what is and isn't working on your homepage, you can take that knowledge and go like, now I know how to address some of the other pages. So there's a part of this is technical, part of it is positioning and messaging. I'm passionate about it because coming back to the beginning of or earlier in the conversation, we talked about being buyer-centric. And I've seen this transition from sales enablement, where you give all the good things that are going to be helpful to advance a customer's understanding of our solution, to the sales team, because those are the people who are primarily owning the conversation with the customer, because back in the day, it used to be who the vendor went to find out what's real. Then we talk about buyer enablement. And buyer enablement, to me, in a kind of oversimplified manner, is saying, let's take all that great information that's gated behind speaking to a sales rep, and just like we started ungating our white papers, let's just make it freely available and easily found on our websites, because buyers don't want to reveal themselves to us until they're ready to, but we do want them to have the information. So we don't want to create an information vacuum, so they have to speak to us, especially if our competitors are making information freely available. So vendor A, vendor B, and vendor C. Vendor A is the technical winner that has the worst website with the least information on it. Vendor C is the worst product, but the best information. Vendor C might be the one who seems most intriguing at the beginning because they're helping you understand how it works and so forth. You haven't gotten to a bake-off of any kind. And so we go from buyer enablement to AI enablement. So what's AI enablement, David? Well, we realize that people are going to AIs to ask all these questions. Why do they do that? Well, because navigating all of our websites has turned out to be such a pain in the butt. Everything's in a different place. It's like, where do I find? What do I find? And then you go to a website anyway, and you try and figure out, what do they do? Who's it for? Does it fit my situation? And you still can't figure it out.
And how much does it cost?
And how much does it cost? Absolutely, right? That's buyer enablement. It's providing the buyer the ability to say, this is a fit. So I'm passionate about it because if AIs are now the interface, I say this in training sessions, the World Wide Web, the internet, is an information service, and AI is the user interface to the information. So our websites are now an information service to the greater corpus of information about who we are. By the way, what happens on third-party websites is really important, but let's just focus on our own websites for now. So I want to make sure that the information I want the buyers to have is complete, understandable, represents their curiosities, right? Matches their information in gathering intent needs. And I have a thing I want to share about how to do that. But I need to now make sure that it's kind of reflected in the mirror of LLMs. And it's a competition of ideas. Anytime someone's asking something, I'm in competition with everybody else who is available to answer those types of questions too. So I've got to make my ideas clear, efficient, discernible, understandable, and relevant. So I'm passionate about it because to me, this is how you discover products today.
It's buyer enablement, really.
It's buyer enablement. Exactly. Now, very correctly, people will say, people mostly buy, especially in software for businesses, they rebuy what they're familiar with. And markets don't move that quickly, generally. Category leaders are category leaders. And so you tend to already know who the players ought to be within a category. So if you're, let's say, a PR professional, you know what the PR software technology vendors are. If you're a demand gen person, if you're an attribution person, you know who the leaders are in that space. And they don't kind of change overnight, though things are changing much quicker now than they have done. So you tend to already lean towards what you're familiar with, right? But over time, that familiarity goes away as you become older, as more things change more quickly. And so I think as time goes by, we're going to see more people discovering for the first time solutions through AI interaction, rather than I kind of already know who the players are, but what else is out there, and let me check. So yes, it is buyer enablement, but how do we do it in a way that now is successful through the disintermediation of LLMs?
You talked about what to do with your website. So you've got that piece of it covered and making sure that information is consistent. And you hinted at the idea of making sure that what goes on third-party sites and the rest of the internet in terms of your brand and how it's represented is equally, if not more important.
Yes. So LLMs like information that is widely corroborated because it seems to be safer. It's not just one person saying it. It's being said across multiple places. And so we often, for good reason, worry about what's on our website and what do we say and so forth. But we don't spend enough time focusing on what's being said elsewhere or trying to plant our flag elsewhere proactively, right? But when there's limited time, limited budget, we do what we need to do. That's, of course, appropriate. But making sure, for example, that the company listings that may exist today, many startups go through rebrands or repositionings, and that's natural. You think it was going to be about X, but it turns out to be X plus prime or something. You repivot, you do these pivots. And as you pivot, you change the language. And as you change the language, that's on your own website. But now you need to go back and clean up what I call a narrative wake, right? All the past versions of who you've been and what you've said, which are probably not completely different from what you are today, but different enough that you decided you needed to change. And so going back and cleaning up all those listings where your company may have been described, perhaps the investor sites, perhaps the review sites, perhaps various partner marketing placements that you may have, certain listicles that may have appeared where you are described as this or that in listicle. You go back to all the places, the analysts that have done category type of activity around you. You want to update them. When you do a classic rebrand, and you change your name from X to Y, of course, you announce that to the world. And for the next year, you say, Y, formerly known as X. so that all these people and systems and things kind of catch up eventually, because we don't all hear the news when it happens. You also need to proactively go back and update all those listings where you have been. And that used to be hard work that teams did and still do. But in small startups, we think so quickly about the now, we don't remember about cleaning up the past. And our past can sometimes be longer and more in depth than our present. So cleaning up that narrative wake can make a big impact for you. And that starts with knowing, of course, what you want to say. If you don't know what you want to say clearly, in a way that is understandable, that is tested with real people. So by the way, sometimes people say you're writing for machines. It's no. You're writing for people. Always you're writing for people. What do they want to know? What's their motivations? What do they understand? Because if you can make, can you do it in a way that isn't with you nodding and winking and nudging them, helping them along? I mean, just blankly, do they get it, right? Then when you've found success there through your primary market research, if you will, customer knowledge, then you can represent your narrative properly. And then it's going to align to the situations and realities of your buyers. And that's the context through which they're asking questions in their LLMs. Very long kind of way of looping a lot of ideas at once.
I'm having a revelation, I think, right now that public relations is going to be more important than ever, potentially. But it is probably worth investing in your PR.
And I think the role of a PR agency is, changing too. I think they're taking into account just what you're saying, the bigger picture of how that brand is represented historically and how it needs to be represented going forward. I've got a few quick takes as we start to kind of wrap things up a little bit. So I'm just going to bounce through a few questions, but you maybe hit on it already, but maybe a concise answer that everybody can take away. What are most marketers getting wrong right now about how AI decides which brands to surface when they're doing the type of research that you're talking about?
They're underrepresenting the importance of clarity, and that clarity is efficiency. When you go to a website and you can quickly from the top of a page understand who they are, what they do, how it helps, where it fits, you feel like you've had success. That's great. And you can continue moving through the website with that context in mind, and everything is framed through that. So clarity is efficiency, and everything about LLMs is about efficiency. All the structural stuff, like the schema and all that stuff, is around efficiency too. But you can put all the structure you want around crappy ideas that people don't understand, and it won't make a difference. You want to make sure that your ideas are clear. And before you build out and try and publish a lot of stuff on a lot of different websites or even your own, because you think you want to have a wider surface to be found on, you need to make sure that you're clear and that you're discernible and that your message is understandable. So that's one aspect.
Yeah, building on that, how do you know if your positioning is actually clear or if it just sounds good internally?
Well, a few different ways. You can ask your current customers, do you recognize this? Does this sound real to you? Those are the ones who are on your side because they've paid. So many times we already have customers, and we're always jiggering with the messaging because we have to, because the world changes and our competition changes. So it's not wrong to do that. We're always needing to remain contextually relevant, right? So we want to make sure that we don't kind of go from something that was connecting to something that wasn't connecting. I like to think of the notion of a kaleidoscope. If you remember having a kaleidoscope and you look through it and you make the tiniest of movements and everything changes the shape, right? So that's how I think of it. We can often have the right words, but somehow they're connected in the wrong ways and it creates a different thing. So check with your customers. So you can do market research. That's the kind. You can also pretend blankly using an LLM and say, okay, so what do you know about this brand? What's coming through? And use that mirror factor, right? And say, well, this seems to be what's coming through. How come it's not picking up on this stuff yet? Maybe that stuff that you've added isn't pervasive enough everywhere. It's only on your own website. So it's kind of drowned out by the narrative froth of your previous messaging. There's a number of ways. But if you can start out by talking to real people to get real feedback, and if you can't, because it's not your role, you don't have that opportunity, speak to your salespeople. Will this resonate or not? Of course, all love and respect for salespeople, they often think in particular narrow context to do with their individual customers and whether that message would fly right now with customer X, which is not wrong. You just need to kind of like, okay, take it with understanding that context when you get that type of feedback.
You had also hit on earlier a little bit about attribution. And maybe even I've read something that you've posted before talking about the reality check and that maybe dashboards could be misleading. And so you have to be careful there. So what should a marketing leader or CMO actually trust when it comes to attribution?
I love this question. The attribution mirage, as I like to talk about it, right? So there's this guy, Chet Holmes, and he talks about this buyer's pyramid that some people will be familiar with, where 3 to 5% of your market is in buy now mode. Okay, you're familiar with this notion. And the others, there's a 7% who could be soon, and another 7% who would be eventually, and then a whole bunch of other people further in the market. Okay. So when we talk about digital attribution, we're talking about people clicking and revealing themselves, essentially. And that is the 3 to 5%. They're saying, I am now ready to reveal myself. I am now ready to let the world know, oh my God, here comes all the email, the phone calls, and all the things, because I'm in the spotlight, right? So that's part of why also the buyer doesn't reveal themselves until they have to. But that digital attribution, for the most part, is a capture mechanism. So that's only the 3 to 5%. So what happens to the other 7 and the next 14, I should say? That's where you're building your brand with people. That's where people are not quite ready. I'm not going to buy this year, next year, quarter, whatever the time period is, but I am learning either actively or passively. Actively because I know I'm going to do a thing eventually, got to do a thing. I want to stay up to speed on my industry, my stuff, or because we've got this thing scheduled. If it's a large IT project, for example, many people who have sold to enterprises will know the SAP upgrade project is scheduled for Q4 of 2027, excuse me, right? And so it's planned way out there. So why? Because everyone has to get their individual systems aligned to that moment. And so people are learning what they need to know, but they won't reveal themselves. So attribution that is looking for clicks is never going to feed into that group of people because you're always harvesting off the top. So the podcast like you're doing right now, the webinars, the trade show events, all the dark social, all of these other things that are not directly click attributable, if you will, to an individual creative on an individual platform at an individual moment, all that other stuff is actually the create marketing. It's where you build your impressions. It's where people are building understanding, right? They come to your website, all the zero-click stuff as well. So it could be clicked, but it didn't become clicked. That's why there was a big zero-click kind of acknowledgement. If you read it, if you digested it, if you got the information, that was the goal I wanted. Whether you clicked on it or not, it would be nice if you did, because then I could tell my boss, look, see, they clicked on it, right? But if you did make the impression, if you did have that impact on people, that was what you wanted. So people think of LinkedIn as an information distribution network where you share ideas, influence people, but they might not click on something to download a white paper or go to a webinar. So attribution can distort budgets because it can distort your budget to go to only the things that have to do with capture, not create. It can distort your teams, right? Exactly, right? It can distort your hiring. We're going to hire more people who are on the capture side, not the create side. It can distort your messaging and positioning because you'd spend less time with educate, inform, and inspire and more on come to the webinar, come to the event, come to this, come to that. And so it can distort your overall balance. And there's a lot of pressure to do this. Try to show, impact, because with marketers, we always want to show we're making an impact. And it's very easy when people click on things. So we spend money where people click on things, but that isn't necessarily where impact is being made.
So you have the tip of the iceberg is your attribution, is what I'm hearing. And then the dark social by Chris Walker is like, I love Chris Walker said something about this where he in B2B marketing started calling people, hey, how'd you hear about us? And found out it was all of these dark social things that there's no attribution for. So it's a really great hot take.
One way we can always try and balance this on our own websites is ask on our demo forms and on our key intake forms, like a contact us form that we may have, ask an open-ended mandatory question. How did you hear about us? The click will come from however the click came. That might be part of it, but then people will tell you stuff. Important to make it open-ended. Why? Let people write what they want to write. If we try and think of all the different which ways to give them a checkbox to try and make it easier, the list becomes so long, nobody looks at it, and they only just check on the thing that's on at the top in the first place. So make it mandatory so that you have to do it. Yes, a bunch of people are going to type in QWERTY. Yes, a bunch of people will put something in that's kind of silly. But this is the only way you're going to find out really if your podcast is making a difference, if your presence is making a difference in various different which ways, that it's not directly attributable to an individual kind of online type of click. It balances things for you. And you need to use both. That's the key point. It's not one is right and one is wrong. It's just that one measures more in one area and then the other one can pick up in the other area too.
And by the way, you don't need to do that question just on B2B. You can ask it in e-commerce as well. And we've gotten a lot of insights for our clients with that question post-purchase.
Absolutely.
So, David, we love to ask this question. Hat came off. We're back to just real David. We'd like to ask who you'd like to lift up. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to lift up other marketers. So who do you think is doing a great job that deserves a shout out?
Well, Nicole Leffer is someone who I would recommend. I always do. So I should take a cut here, Nicole. But Nicole does a great job. So who is Nicole? Nicole is based, I think she's in Atlanta. She is a person who's focused for years now on AI and marketing. She's a very real person, very down to earth, very approachable, very easy to speak with. AI can be imposing. It can make you feel as if you don't know. It can make you feel like I should know this by now type of stuff. And you never get that vibe when you're speaking with Nicole. She has a number of training classes that she offers. And just following her work on LinkedIn, you can learn things and start to feel, if you will, like, no, it's not just me. They're all trying to figure this out, right? And here's someone who has helped train and set a kind of a way of thinking about things that's helpful, and in a way that helps a CMO or a marketing leader say, how do I bring this into my team? I want to uplift my team another level this quarter or this year. So she's an individual I would highly recommend, and I think she's doing great work.
Great. We'll go follow Nicole. And then speaking of following, how can people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. Various ways to kind of contact me through DMs or setting up time. My name is David Kirkdorffer. I'm the only one on the planet that I have come to see. Though recently with The Voice, there was a Jordan Kirkdorffer who was competing, and that was interesting for a while. He's from that part of the country where my father was from originally, in Indiana. So Kirkdorffer is a bit of a mouthful of a name. So let me spell it here for those who are just listening. It's Kirk, D for David, O-R, F as in Frank, E-R. So David Kirkdorffer, and I'm on LinkedIn.
That's great. Really appreciate this, David. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I think our listeners have enjoyed it as well.
I hope so. It's been so much fun, and happy to answer any other questions that either you guys have or perhaps any of your listeners have in individual conversations.
Thanks for joining the LiftKit Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, John Hoeft, founder of LiftKit Marketing, a consultancy dedicated to supporting agencies and marketers with their digital growth strategies.
And I'm the co-host, Danielle Schermerhorn, a former agency owner and current e-commerce specialist with deep experience across both brand and agency sides of the marketing world.
Each week, we'll bring you conversations with marketing professionals who are doing great work, whether they're leading teams, building campaigns, launching products, or just figuring it out behind the scenes.
Our guests will share their personal journeys, the real stories behind their success, the challenges they faced, and the wins they're most proud of. We'll also hear what's next for them and what they see on the horizon for the industry.
At LiftKit Marketing, we believe in celebrating people, recognizing great work, and lifting up those who are making an impact. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the episode.